It is midnight in Washington, 5 in London, and 2 on a Monday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Ganyang. Let's get a check of the main stories we're following at this hour. At least 4 people, including 3 Koreans, are killed and 14 others wounded as an explosion ripped through a bus carrying Korean tourists in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, the deadliest attack on vacationers there in years. Final checkup is underway at North Korea's Mount Kumgang Resort, where in just a few days will play a host to the first reunion of war-divided families in more than 3 years. And the latest from Sochi, from Team Korea's 3rd medal coming from short track speed skating to now Russian Viktor On's gold. We have all the week in action and what to look forward to on day 11 of the Olympic Games. We'll have those stories and more, but first let us begin with the deadly bombing in Egypt. Now, the bus bombing in Egypt on Sunday has left at least 4 people dead, and this includes 3 Koreans. The Egyptian government is investigating the incident, and Korea's foreign ministry has dispatched an immediate response delegation to the site of the attack earlier this morning. ARIRANG News Foreign Affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
At least 4 people, including 3 Koreans, were killed Sunday after an explosion ripped through a tourist bus near a border crossing between Egypt and Israel. South Korea's foreign ministry confirmed that a Korean tourist, 2 Korean tour guides, and an Egyptian bus driver were killed in the explosion, while 14 tourists were wounded and are being treated at nearby hospitals. The bus was carrying 35 people who were waiting to cross the border to Israel after spending a night at Sinai when an armed man, suspected to be in his 20s, threw a bomb at the bus. The Korean tourist group was reportedly on a 12-day pilgrimage that included stops in Turkey, Egypt, and Israel. The Egyptian government has declared the incident a terrorist attack and is investigating the case. Whether the attack was targeting Koreans remain unclear, and no group has stepped forward to take responsibility. Once a popular tourist destination, Sinai has been rocked by several attacks since the army ousted President Mohamed Morsi last July. Korea's foreign ministry dispatched a delegation to Egypt on Monday morning, and they will join officials from the Korean embassies in Egypt and Israel at the site of the attack. The ministry also set up a task force and held an emergency meeting shortly after the incident was reported to come up with countermeasures. The ministry has issued a special travel warning for Egypt, practically banning Koreans from visiting the region, and has asked Koreans traveling in Egypt and its 4 neighboring countries, Israel, Jordan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, to return as soon as possible. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
And we are getting reports that 15 survivors of Sunday's terror attack, accompanied by a South Korean embassy staff, crossed the Egypt-Israel border into Israel about an hour ago, and they are waiting to get on board a flight back to Korea. Now, 12 others who have been severely injured remain in the hospital. And we will have more updates for you as the story develops throughout the day. Now, meanwhile, preparations are in full swing for a long overdue round of reunions for families separated since the Korean War. With only 3 days left until the reunions are set to get underway, anticipation is building up for what will be the first such event in over 3 years. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
A 15-member South Korean delegation arrived in Mount Kumgang over the weekend to fine-tune the details for an upcoming round of reunions for families separated by the Korean War. The delegation, comprising officials from the Unification Ministry and members of the Red Cross, is hoping to ensure the reunion venue and accommodations are in good condition.
We will do our best to make sure the family reunions proceed smoothly.
The main concern is the weather. Snowplows have already removed most of the 2 meters of snow that fell at Mount Kumgang last week, but forecasters have issued a preliminary warning for another snowstorm this week. The delegation also submitted the final list of those participating in the reunions. On the first day of the event, 84 South Koreans will reunite with family in the north. 3 days later, 88 North Koreans will reunite with family members from the south. The two Koreas agreed last week to proceed with the reunions, despite an earlier demand by Pyongyang that the reunions could only happen if the South postponed an upcoming military exercise with the United States. Seoul has repeatedly stated that the reunions and the military exercises should be dealt with separately. If the reunions go ahead as planned, it will be the first such event in over 3 years. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
It's been a year in the making, and on Monday, a UN panel is set to conclude North Korea should face international punishment for its systematic abuse of its own people. According to reported leaks of its findings, the UN Commission of Inquiry on the North Human Rights will say the regime has committed crimes against humanity and should be referred to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Now, North Korea has long been accused of grave rights abuses, ranging from holding hundreds of thousands of political prisoners in concentration camps to committing torture and public executions. Pyongyang has long denied those accusations. The commission will present its final report to the UN Human Rights Council next month. Back here in this country, 3 of the nation's largest credit card firms are being subject to a 3-month business suspension starting this Monday as punishment for the leak of millions of customers' financial data. The Financial Services Commission says KB Financial Group, Nonghyup Financial Group, and retailer Lotte Group have been banned from issuing new credit and debit cards or extending loans until May 16th. Existing customers will be provided with financial services as usual. The 3 firms estimate the business suspension will cost them a combined $1.9 billion in lost business. Tens of millions of cardholders were affected by last month's breach, the largest in the country's history. Meanwhile, the Korean government is aiming to give the economy another shot in the arm by announcing the detailed measures of its 3-year economic plan. The package of measures to be officially laid out before the end of the month will focus on cutting red tape and boosting the country's 5 brightest sectors, including education, finance, and software. Shin Se-min reports.
The Korean government is gearing up a new 3-year economic plan that includes a negative list system for deregulation in an effort to boost investment. Government officials said Sunday that the new plan will ease restrictions within regulations and streamline red tape. The new plan will mainly bolster Korea's promising industrial sectors, namely health, education, tourism, finance, and software. The plan, which will be announced before the end of the month, also aims to boost the number of women and young people in the workforce and ease the financial burden of private education. In an effort to raise the nation's slumping youth employment level, students not entering university will be able to receive vocational training. The government will also provide financial support to small and medium-sized media content developers to promote the sector as a high-valued industry. The government will also adjust underground economic activities, enforce strict taxation, and eliminate unfair business practices on smaller companies. Regarding the inter-Korean relations, the government is also looking to include reunification matters as part of the 3-year plan. President Park Geun-hye has said her administration has set itself a 474 goal by the end of her term, which means 4% economic growth, a 70% employment rate, and an annual per capita income of around $40,000. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
And now taking a brief look at how the local stock market is doing at this hour. Seoul shares touched their highest point in nearly 4 weeks in early trading on this Monday on demand from foreign and institutional investors who stayed upbeat on the prospects for the global economy thanks to positive growth data from the Eurozone. As of 1:30 p.m. Korea time, the benchmark Kospi was up 0.3% at 1947 after hitting an intraday high of 1955 just after the open, its highest since January 23rd. The Tech-heavy Kosdaq was down 0.1%, while on the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency was trading weaker against the greenback at 1,061 won.
All of the day's important events. Events close to home, around the world.
Second half last, figure out what winners.
The arts and culture scene and the heart of global business.
Experts added that
ARIRANG News has your whole day covered.
the legislature will convene a plenary
plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government. Maverick independent lawmaker An Chol-soo has a dream of shaking up Korean politics, and now his new party, which will officially launch next month, has a name: the New Political Vision Party. Officials say the name will officially be approved at a party meeting in Seoul on Monday afternoon, where An and some 320 members will ready the groundwork for the party's launch. Now, An supporters plan to establish a central steering committee, which will be the top body in making and handling decisions over the next few weeks. The former independent presidential candidate and his aides will also work on measures to boost party membership nationwide ahead of local elections in June. Meanwhile, Korea's southern coast has been hit by yet another disastrous oil spill, this time in waters off the port city of Busan. Well over 200,000 liters of oil leaked into the water after a freighter collided with an oil tanker on Saturday. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
237,000 liters. That's how much oil officials say gushed into the sea after a Liberian-registered freighter collided with an oil tanker on Saturday. The amount of oil spilled is over 70,000 liters more than during another oil spill in Yeosu last month. Over the weekend, the Coast Guard managed to place a 500-meter-long oil fence around the main spill to try and contain it, and chemical dispersants are being sprayed onto it. The police said they succeeded in sealing off the hull in the vessel 3 hours after the collision. The only positive news thus far is that no oil has been found near the seashore yet, and no cases of contamination damage have been reported. There are, however, concerns fish farms about 5 kilometers from the spill could become contaminated. The maritime police say it'll take about 4 days of cleanup work to prevent any secondary damage.
We have 70 vessels deployed to contain the spill, including response vessels. The cleanup work is expected to take a few more days.
The Korea Coast Guard suspects poor weather conditions and high waves to be the main cause of the crash. But the maritime police say they'll launch a probe to determine the exact cause of the accident as soon as the cleanup work is finished. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is urging the international community to take steps to tackle climate change, which he described as perhaps the world's most fearsome destructive weapon that could threaten our entire way of life. Son Jung-in has more.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is calling on all nations to respond to what he said is the greatest challenge of our generation: climate change. In a speech to Indonesian students, civic leaders, and government officials in Jakarta on Sunday, Kerry said man-made climate change could threaten our entire way of life, adding it can now be considered a natural weapon of mass destruction, and stressed that every person in every country must take responsibility for the problem and act immediately. He also said there is scientific evidence that global warming is threatening not only the environment but also the world economy. He outlined recent weather disasters, particularly flooding and typhoons in Asia, and their impact on commerce, agriculture, fishing, and daily life of billions of people. He added that warming sea temperatures could have a negative effect on Indonesia's fishing industry, while rising sea levels could put much of the country underwater. He cited a recent report by the UN's climate panel that said 95% of scientists are certain that humans have been the dominant cause of global warming since the 1950s. The report argued that greenhouse gas emissions will further contribute to the Earth's rising temperatures and changes in all aspects of the climate system. The solution, Kerry says, is a new global energy policy that shifts reliance from fossil fuels to cleaner technologies. On Saturday, the U.S. and China issued a joint statement saying they had reached an agreement to cooperate more closely to curb greenhouse gases, including reducing vehicle emissions and improving the energy efficiency of buildings. Kerry was in Indonesia on the last leg of a 3-nation tour of Asia that took him to Korea and then China. After leaving Indonesia on Monday, he will travel on to Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
China's smartphone market, currently the largest in the world, is expected to get even bigger this year, with its 4G long-term evolution market expected to grow more than 5 times in the coming months. U.S. market researcher Strategy Analytics said the number of LTE smartphones in China will reach 135 million units this year, a jump of 547% from last year. Well, LTE smartphones are expected to represent 36% of China's mobile phone market in the coming year, a jump from 6% when the nation launched its LTE service back in December. The explosive growth in the Chinese market has Korean smartphone makers gearing up to expand their sales in China. Samsung Electronics will reportedly promote its Galaxy S4 in China, and LG is planning to market its G Pro phablets there. Meanwhile, the number of medical tourists from China surpassed those from the U.S. for the first time in 2012. The Korea Health Industry Development Institute says Sunday that people from China represented 20% of all medical tourists to Korea in 2012, topping those from the U.S. at 19.2% for the first time ever. Well, the institute said nearly 160,000 people from 188 countries came to Korea for medical procedures in 2012, marking a 30.4% increase from the previous year. They spent 267.3 billion won, or just over $252 million, a 47.9% increase in medical spending from the year before. The majority of medical tourists from China were women in their 20s and 30s, and half of them had come for plastic surgery or other cosmetic procedures. Now it's time for a recap of all the weekend action from the 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics. And for that, of course, we're joined live in the studio by our Lee Tae-ho. Good afternoon to you, Tae-ho.
Good afternoon.
I imagine that there is a lot to talk about today, considering all the action coming from Sochi over the weekend.
That's right. There was over 2 days of action over the weekend. And first up, Korea's third medal at the Sochi Winter Games was won by 17-year-old Shin Seok-hee in the women's short track competition, the 1,500-meter event, and it was her first Olympic medal ever.
Right. I mean, it was a thrilling race. I was on my toes up until the very last blade came in.
I think everybody was on the edge of their seats as well, because all was going well for Shim until the final 2 laps, where Zhu Yang of China squirted past her at the last moment to capture the gold.
Right. I mean, Shin Seok-hee going into the race was a gold medal favorite, but, she is an excellent athlete. However, I suppose Zhu Yang's years of experience could not be topped by Shim. But despite having skated such greatly and having won a silver medal, the 17-year-old was crying and in tears after the race.
She was really apologetic and in tears, sobbing, because she really wanted the goal for Team Korea, to fire up Team Korea so everybody does a little bit better for the remainder of the Olympics. And, she's still so young, 17 years old. She hasn't even graduated high school yet, and she has all this pressure and all this responsibility on her shoulders. And so it's really amazing.
Right. Nonetheless, excellent skating and excellent. She did perform very well, and we look forward to more of her races in the Sochi Winter Olympics as well as in Pyeongchang 4 years later. Now, another great story from the weekend comes from men's short track speed skating.
That's right. And what a story it was. Victor An of Russia, or the skater formerly known as An Yeon-soo, who skated for Korea, won the gold medal for Russia in the first ever gold medal, or first ever medal for Russia in the short track competition overall. And this was a great story that was making international headlines all over the world.
I mean, it was a great moment for Korean fans and Team Korea and Korea. But again, at the same time, a very heartbreaking one to see him on the podium with a Russian flag being raised. But he was quite emotional after the race.
That's right. It was kind of a bittersweet victory for Koreans, seeing him in another uniform, especially the Russian uniform. But despite all that, I think it was a triumphant story. He collapsed onto the ice after he won the gold medal, kissing the ice. He was sobbing and crying. I mean, you can only imagine 8 long years of 4 surgeries, a year-long rehab, relocation to a new country, finally to emerge victorious again and on top of his game. So despite, what country he was skating for, because it was kind of saddening for me as well, seeing him waving the Russian flag. But as a sports fan, I think it was just a great story overall.
I mean, he said repeatedly in interviews that the only reason why he became a naturalized Russian is because of his love for short track speed skating. And I suppose this was his chance to prove to the world and to all Koreans that that was really, truly the reason why he became a Russian, and now he has succeeded in doing so.
And, I think what further exemplified this was his actions after the race, where he embraced Shin Da-eun, a former Korean teammate, and he said, "Good job on the race." And it just shows, a spirit of the Olympian and the Olympics overall, and that he's still just a true sportsman.
I mean, it's a loss for Korea, but then again, certainly does seem like Team Russia struck gold with this victor on.
Definitely, both literally and figuratively. I mean, this was Russia's first ever medal in the short track competition, and they scored 2. An Hyun-soo scored the gold, and his Russian teammate scored the silver. So, in every aspect, Russia definitely scored gold with An, and even Putin had An's picture on his personal SNS, congratulating An for his success at these games.
Right, truly inspiring. I'm sure we will get to hear more of his story and his side of all things after the Olympics are over, as he promised. So we look forward to that, and we will see An again during the 5,000-meter relay event. Of course, he will be skating for Team Russia, but you will still be rooting for him.
That's right. Now, he still has a chance for another few medals at these Sochi Winter Games, and he's already the most decorated short track athlete in the history of the Winter Games. 5 medals total, 4 gold, 1 bronze. So we'll see if he can add to his total.
Right. Another, another action came from men's figure skating competition, and supposedly we have a new skating star.
That's right. Now, Yuzuru Hanyu, 19-year-old skating prodigy from Japan, won, or rather didn't lose the gold after a spectacular performance in the short program. I think the turnaround from the short program to the free skate program was much too short, and all the skaters were a bit tired, which kind of showed in their lackluster performance. Yuzuru himself fell twice during his free skate program and still managed to clinch the gold. So,
I mean, congratulations to him, as well as his coach, Brian Orser. He has, produced 2 Olympic champions in 2 consecutive Olympics.
It's amazing how Orser has done this. I mean, he really does seem to have a knack for finding these prodigies and then coaching them up. And we see the results once again with Hanyu and, of course, in Vancouver with Kim Yeona, who is a superstar around the world now.
Now, another sporting event that's stealing the highlight or the spotlight is women's curling team in Sochi for Korea.
That's right, and you wouldn't expect it from curling in Korea, but it's really taken off as a really popular sport. A lot of people are very interested in it. However, the unfortunate news is Curls Day, as they are affectionately known here in Korea, is mathematically eliminated from the Olympics, losing to Denmark. So it's unfortunate, but it shows that, there's more popularity now. More people will be looking to these games in the 2018 Pyeongchang Games. So we'll probably need to invest a little bit more into the program and develop young athletes.
Right, and there's an interesting story with the skipper of the Korean team, Kim Ji-sun. She is married to a Chinese curling team member.
That's right. Now, Zhu Xiaoming is a curling athlete for Team China as well. And they're both at the Sochi Winter Olympics, and they were able to spend Valentine's Day together last Friday, of course. And another interesting fact was that Team China and his wife, Team Korea, were up against each other last week, and he came out and said he's rooting for his countrymen, but I think deep down inside we all know how he was thinking and how he was feeling, of course.
We'll hear more of their story, of course, after the Olympics, again, with the curling team as well being so popular. Now, let's move on to the Korean men's bobsledding team. It saw its first Olympic action.
Now, this is a new event for Team Korea. We had 2 teams performing in the 2-man bobsled event, Team A and Team B. Both are in the prelims right now, placed at 18th and 25th, respectively. And when you mention bobsledding, of course, in the Olympics, you can't help but thinking of a movie, right? Cool Runnings, and they're also in the Olympics this time as well.
Right, the Jamaican bobsledding team. How are they doing?
Well, this is the first time they managed to qualify for the Olympics in 12 long years, and to commemorate this event, the Jamaican Tourism Agency actually made a music video supporting and cheering for the Jamaican bobsled team. Let's take a look.
Run the track, it's bobsled time. Make room on the ice. Start out feeling nice. You know we do it right.
Very Jamaican style.
Oh yes, reggae music all throughout. And what's interesting is they synced it to the Sochi track. So throughout the song, the music video, if you turn it on as soon as the race starts, it'll be at the right moment on the song, depicting where they are on the track. So interesting indeed. And
I hear that in the last minute, at the last turn, the music video kind of gives a hint to the athletes on how to turn and things like that. So, I think some fans will have it on for the Jamaican team when they, I suppose, come down on their sled.
And, although they are in last place right now, I don't think it matters because, to manage to qualify for the Olympics is amazing, of course, for all athletes. And although the movie was comedic, this Jamaican team is all about business here at the Sochi Games.
Right, and they had a little episode of losing their sled in the earlier days of the Olympics, but they found it obviously, and we're all rooting for Team Jamaica because of their inspirational story. Now, that was the weekend games, and we look forward to today's games and your wrap up tomorrow.
All right, and I'll be back at 4 o'clock for more of the latest in sports and what to watch for tonight as well.
And that's all from me at this hour. I'll be back with more of the day's latest at 4 p.m. Korea time. See you then.